Welcome to today's edition of the Rush 24/7 podcast.
Hey, greetings, my friends. Welcome. It's great to be back with you. Rush Limbaugh here at the Excellence in Broadcasting Network. And a full week of broadcast excellence now officially underway. Looking forward to chatting with you today. Telephone number 800-282-2882. The email address lrushbo@eibnet.us. So I was off Friday because I had to go to Sedona, Arizona for a wedding. My cousin, once removed Stephen Nathaniel Limbaugh III, got married to Jennifer Bond. Now Jennifer Bond Limbaugh of Phoenix, the famous Bond family of Phoenix. And it was a great wedding. It was at the L'Auberge de Sedona. It's a beautiful setting along the creek there. And fantastic weekend. I have to tell you a little story. My drivers that picked us up at the airport and took us around all weekend were from Venice. And they had very thick Italian accents. And they were very, very nice. And they were very appreciative. They were just happy as they could be. And I said, why are you guys here? How do you end up in Sedona, Arizona from Venice? You know what they said? They said, there's no place for us in Italy anymore. It's all the communists and the immigrants. And there's no place for us. So the two guys randomly run into driving SUVs around Sedona, Arizona. Had to get the hell out of there because of the communists and the immigrants. I said, why Sedona? He said, well, the red rocks remind us of the Valpolicella, which is a wine. It's a famous red wine. Anyway, my friends, there is hysteria across this country and across the pond in Europe. There's this hysteria everywhere you look, and a lot of it is rooted in a panicked, hysterical need on the left to protect the legacy of Barack Hussein Obama. Pretty much everything of the Obama administration is being pared away, or trying to. There's severe efforts. Obamacare, the first stage of the repeal, has taken place. And the panic that has ensued over this. Are you aware, and I tried to mention to this, I warned people over the weekend this was coming, and they looked at me like I'm nuts. I said, are you aware? And if you're not, you had better be prepared to hear, starting very soon, that the Republican health care bill that passed the House of Representatives now treats the cause of rape as a pre-existing condition in order to deny rape victims and the victims of sexual abuse health insurance. Now, when I tell you that, does that make any sense to you? When I mentioned this to the people at dinner one night this week, and they looked at me like, what are you talking about? And I didn't blame them. It sounds nonsensical. You have a bunch of hysterical leftist women that are running down. This story has now gone viral. There are versions of it in the Washington Post. It started in, I think, New York Magazine with a woman writing that the Republicans want to deny everybody with pre-existing conditions any insurance. That's lie number one. And now they're trying to deny rape victims and sexual abuse victims health insurance on the basis. And none of this is true. It is literally, it's worse than made up. It's worse than lies. This is insane hysteria. Literally made up for the drive-by media to pick this up and run with it. And literally what they're claiming is that the cause of rape, whatever that is, the circumstances that led to rape and the rape itself then equal a pre-existing condition. And the cause could be post-traumatic stress disorder, could be any number of things. And these evil Republicans want to deny the victims of rape and sexual abuse health insurance on the basis that it's a pre-existing. Never mind the fact that Republicans are bending over backwards to include pre-existing conditions in virtually everything. But as is often the case, here's a premise that's put out there. It's kind of like the global warming premise was put out there. And what do? We validate the premise by accepting it and trying to reject it intellectually and logically. There are already pieces saying, this is not right, this is wrong, with intellectual reasons why, and I'll share it all with you as the program unfolds, rather than just say, you're insane. Rather than just say, you're a lunatic. Rather than just say, this is absurd, and laugh at it and move on. No, we must tackle it intellectually. Like climate change. There's no science in climate change. What do? We developed our own science answers to it. And it all ends up deep in the weeds. Nobody can keep track of it, and they don't care to, because all of this is emotion-based, not issue or intellectual reason-based. So listening to it a second time, does it make sense to you? How can anybody even think this way? What do you have to be doing after the Republicans pass their health care bill to start thinking, well, that bill has rape victims or victims of pre-existing conditions, and therefore the Republicans want to deny them health. How do you even think this way? So that's one area we're going to get into today here. The French election is another. The bottom line here is, folks, nothing's going to change in France. Not a single thing is going to change in France. These two candidates were remarkably the same in their issues. The biggest difference between the two of them, the 39-year-old Macron and Marine Le Pen, was immigration. She wanted to limit it to 10,000 for either a month or a year or whatever, and he wants to limit it to 210,000 on it. They're both more socialist than centrist, especially the guy. But Marine Le Pen is socialist, too, because all of France is socialist. She just happened to have a little nationalist tinge to it. But they're both socialists. And there's a guy that wrote at PJ Media named Bruce Boer-May, B-A-W-E-R, May. He's lived in France a while. And this is the best short explanation that I've found to explain what happened in France. People in France are terrified to speak up about Islam, militant Islamic terrorism, Muslims. They're just terrified to speak up about it, let alone do anything about it. Viewed through American eyes, it may seem a European thing, although it's not as uncommon in America, alas, as it used to be. In other words, there are plenty of Americans that turn a blind eye rather than deal with it, rather than confront it, just ignore it and hope it never happens where you live. But don't dare speak up about anything because it might make you a racist. Don't dare do anything about it because it might cause you to get called out in the media as a pig or whatever. So people just blindly lay down and accept things because it's too risky to speak up and stand up. And in the case of France, it was even too risky to stand up and vote. So he writes, part of what I'm saying is that these people in France don't have much of a sense of ownership in their own countries. They don't have much of a sense of ownership in their own communities. They're used to being ruled over. They're used to the idea that there are people above them in the hierarchy whose job it is to think about and take care of the big things while they, the citizens, the hamsters and the mice, take care of their own little lives and try to stay out of the way, but they're used to be, and they are. The European Union is going to continue to run France as it has been running France for the last number of years. The left is trying to say, in fact, we got a soundbite from Christian Amanpour, that's it. The people of France said, basta, no more to Trump. They're trying to say that the French didn't want anything Trumpian in France, so they stood up and effectively were voting against Trump. It's insane. Folks, no matter where you look, there is insanity at the highest levels in government and in business. The one thing about this election, excuse me, I could hit the cough button, but I'm lazy. There's an observation that you have to make about this election. And it is this. Doesn't this prove once and for all, despite what the Democrats are trying to do with Sally Yates today? Have you heard, by the way, pardon the change of direction here. Breaking news right before the program, NBC, Obama warned Trump against hiring Mike Flynn, say officials. Now, up until moments ago, we thought it was Sally Yates who's testifying before the Senate Judiciary Subcommittee. Boy, the left is, their tongues are on the sidewalk today, panting. Michael Flynn worked for Trump for 3 weeks. And they got rid of him before Trump's transition ever really even got into gear. They got rid of him, but they're still trying to tie Flynn to Trump because they're still trying to tie the Russians to Trump. And Sally Yates is going to be the next one with a bombshell to indicate whatever. She's not going to have a bombshell. She's going to have just enough to allow the media to continue this narrative that the Russians tampered, that the Russians have a closet secret deal with Trump, even though Dianne Feinstein, we played the soundbite for you last week. Dianne Feinstein being interviewed by Wolf Blitzer. Is there anything you can tell us? Have you seen any evidence whatsoever? Any evidence whatsoever that there was collusion between the Russians and the Trump? Not at this time. End of story. No, it's not the end of story, because there is no story. There is a narrative that they are not going to let go, and it's all oriented. Well, it's not all. There are two things: destroy Trump, but that is all part of preserving and maintaining the Obama legacy, which is really ratcheting up now with the Republican vote on repealing Obamacare. That has sent panic throughout every channel of the left. But if you look at the French election, this ought to prove once and for all the Russians are not very good at rigging elections, because after all, until the polls closed in France, all we heard was how the Russians were putting out all the stops for Le Pen, including hacking Macron's emails. Did you hear that story right before the vote on Sunday? Oh, no, look at how closely things happening in France, just like they happened here. The Russians hacked Clinton's emails, and now it looks like there's a major hack of Macron's emails. But the French government moved in and prevented the media from releasing any of those emails. So we didn't even know if there was a hack. The whole thing could have been a made-up story. But the meme was that the Russians were pulling out all the stops to elect Le Pen, including hacking this little kid's emails, which is laughable in a dozen ways, not the least being that Macron's supposedly hacked emails were not released until after there was a ban on reporting them under French law 48 hours before the polls opened. So the French media was banned by law from reporting on the hacked emails. So either the Russians are incredibly incompetent, or the whole thing was made up by the Macron campaign in order to feed the fear-mongering about the Russians trying to rig the election for Le Pen. My money is on the latter. And if the Russians were trying to rig the election for Le Pen in the same way they rigged the election for Trump by hacking emails and then releasing them and having embarrassed, their efforts were thwarted. How incompetent of the Russians. So nothing's going to change in France, nothing to speak of. The people in France, you remember, my friends, back when the Berlin Wall fell. In the early 1990s, after the wall fell, there were efforts undertaken here in the United States by many people to travel to Russia and to start working with policymakers and citizens on the reestablishment of freedom, because the communism of the Soviet Union had imploded along with the falling of the Berlin Wall. And I remember there were a bunch of liberal Democrats in this country, and you who are new to the program may not even know this, but there are a bunch of Democrats and leftists who said that it was a waste of time to try to instruct the Russian people in freedom because they hadn't had it in so long, they wouldn't know what to do with it. And they went so far as to say, for some people, freedom just isn't the best thing. For some people, freedom is a bad idea. And they said it was a bad idea for citizens of the Soviet Union because they hadn't been free essentially since 1917. They had become so accustomed to living under tyranny that the best outcome would be a continued controlling central state dominating their lives. So opposed to freedom in Russia was the American left and the Democrat Party. There were efforts made to thwart that. Remember, Paul Weyrich led a contingent of conservatives over there to try to help the Russians, because it is. I mean, it's a shock to your system when everything's been provided for you, no matter how poorly and no matter how short supply, when you haven't had to engage in self-reliance for your needs, not wants, all of a sudden that is a shock to the system. This is essentially what they're saying about the French. It's the same thing. When you read, well, sense of ownership is absent. They don't think they own their country. They don't think they own their communities. They're used to being ruled over. They're used to the idea there are people above them in the hierarchy whose job it is to think about and take care of the big things. So we're being told here that the natural order of things for the French and even for all of Europe is for the governing and ruling elite to continue as the governing and ruling elite, because the people really, they're not equipped. They have no desire. They want to be dominated. They want to be ruled. They want to be ordered around. As long as they can buy some food and some soap, that's it. And this is how the myth spreads that freedom is not for everyone. And the French, in this case, have voted for the status quo. Nothing's going to change. Immigration is still going to continue. Tax rates are still going to skyrocket. Unemployment's not going to change. The unemployment rate isn't going to change. Terrorism's still going to happen. It's going to be the status quo. That's what they elected. We'll be back here in just a second. Don't go away. Let me show you some of this hysteria. Are you ready? Bette Midler, song stylist extraordinaire, Bette Midler, GOP are homegrown Assads gassing their own with the health care bill. I'm not making this up. When the House passed Obamacare replacement bill, the American Health Care Act, whatever it is, last Thursday, Bette Midler tweeted that the Republican Party was gassing their own people by repealing Obamacare. So the homegrown Assads in the Freedom Caucus want employers to not have to offer health care to employees, like gassing their own people. Here's another headline. Health Act repeal could threaten U.S. job engine. Health care repeal could threaten U.S. job engine? You know, have you seen the news that the Republicans have committed suicide with this health care repeal? Not so fast on that. Let me present an alternative today as the program unfolds. But I generally want to deal with something here. This hysteria over the Republican health care bill is grotesque. And it is nothing more than the media's desperate attempt to keep Obama's key domestic achievement alive at all costs. If you didn't know any better, you would think Obamacare was the most beloved piece of federal legislation ever, that it had a 100% approval rating, that everybody was happy with it, that nobody was suffering from it. And the Republicans have come along and want people to die. The Republicans want to kill people. The Republicans want to deny rape victims access to insurance because rape and the cause of it equals a pre-existing condition. The truth about Obamacare is it's killing jobs, it's killing the U.S. economy, and as long as Obamacare is in force, I don't see how our economy can ever grow beyond 3%. With the federal government owning 1/6 of the U.S. economy and making a mess of it, with premiums skyrocketing beyond any hope of people being able to pay for it, and of course all of this is a direct route to single payer, which now you have Obama's big supporters like Warren Buffett and Bill Gates and Charlie Munger all now out supporting single payer after the Republican health care passes the House. You notice it's these very wealthy people out there pushing for single payer. They know they will never have to enroll in that eventuality, government running health care. They'll never have to be governed by it. So it's easy to gain points and political favor by talking socialism and government taking care of everybody when they're never going to have to suffer the consequences. It's typical of what they do. Hi, welcome back. El Rushbo meeting and surpassing all audience expectations every day. So the Republicans are slowly but surely wiping the Obama presidency off the map. And if you don't necessarily agree with it, they're being successful at, you have to admit that there is an effort underway to do just that. And if you don't find it within the halls of Capitol Hill and the Congress and the House and the Senate, you do find it at the White House. There is a serious effort to wiping the Obama presidency off the map. And the big signature claim to Obama's presidency is Obamacare, and the first step has been taken. And this has caused Obama now to show up in public and to try to tamper with this effort, which was predicted. He's now claiming that it's a courageous thing to have done Obamacare, and we must muster courage to stop what the Republicans are trying to do. Democrats of all stripes have rejected and continue to reject Trump as president. But more than that, they are apoplectic over the prospect of a diminished Obama legacy. Obama's just applied for certification and tax status of his future Obama presidential library. And by the way, he has attempted to set it up the same way the Clintons set up the Clinton Crime Family Foundation, which became the Clinton Global Initiative. The president's, the whole Clinton operation began as the president's library and massage parlor thing in Little Rock, and everything about it grew from that well beyond the limits of the law in terms of what you can do, raising money, spending money, tax consequences. Obama's model is almost identical to what the Clintons did, except Obama's not going to spend 6 years in the transition from the presidential library to the vacuum cleaner that the Clinton Foundation became and accepting foreign contributions for who knows whatever. Obama's in the process of setting up the same thing. And, of course, the presidential library is the first thing, and that's where all the great achievements are and all the presidential papers signaling the great work and the brilliance. And here come those rascally Republicans right on the day and the month that Obama's establishing his library, trying to wipe out his signature achievement. So they're apoplectic about this. They're apoplectic over the prospect of a diminished Obama legacy. And make no mistake, if Trump unwinds Obama's Iran deal, we're going to hear how the world is coming to a quick and bloody end. It's going to be the same list of catastrophes. People are going to die. People are going to get murdered. People are going to it's the never-ending litany that really comes under the umbrella. Republicans are killing people. Republicans are starving children. And it's gotten to the point now that it's lunacy. There's an effort to wipe the Obama presidency off the map. This has triggered a metastasizing rage. Democrats are saying, who in their right mind would resist change to Obamacare? Well, it's exploding right before our very eyes. Even the drive-by media can't avoid reporting that. The end of Obamacare, folks, is bigger than the bill itself. It represents a rejection bigger than the voter rejection of Hillary Clinton. If Obamacare is repealed, if Obama's name is taken off whatever is substituted for it, if it becomes Trump Care rank, I don't care what it becomes. If it happens, because Obama has been taken out of it and enough of his signature legislation has been repealed and replaced with something else, that is going to cause a new wave of hysteria and panic. And I think what's happening out there in many sectors is the left is coming to grips with the prospect. This isn't guaranteed by any stretch, but they are coming to grips with the prospect of reality crashing into the Obama presidency. They are horrified at the thought, literally horrified at the thought that the Obama legacy could unravel and be untangled. If you listen to the left's predictions of what sounds like a Republican-triggered genocide, you'd think we're all fetuses in a Planned Parenthood waiting room. This is the way they're trying to characterize all of this. Let me come back to this story that, folks, it defies common sense understanding. New York Magazine, early Thursday morning, New York Magazine published an online item which claimed that rape is a pre-existing condition under the health care bill Republicans passed in the House. Sarah Spellings, in Trump's America, rape is a pre-existing condition. Now listen to this. An amendment in the GOP health care reform bill will allow states to deny coverage for pre-existing conditions, including sexual assault. Pre-Obamacare rape survivors who sought treatment for their injuries could be denied health care later on. Under Obamacare, pre-existing conditions were guaranteed to receive coverage, among them sexual assault. The American Health Care Act is going to change that. The new MacArthur-Meadows Amendment will allow states to discriminate based on medical history, reportedly without addressing the subsequent high cost of health care for millions of Americans. In addition to rape, postpartum depression, cesarean sections, and surviving domestic violence are all considered pre-existing conditions. Companies can also deny coverage for gynecological services and mammograms. How many of you are under the impression that in the Republican health care bill, pre-existing conditions have been wiped out? In other words, how many of you are aware that they had to add $8 billion to an already existing $130 billion fund to cover pre-existing conditions? The Republicans bent over backwards to keep pre-existing conditions in, because they were afraid of stories just like this, although they didn't anticipate pre-existing conditions that are rape and abuse related. So that original story runs, and then the next day in the Washington Post, a column, "I was raped. Thanks to Republicans, I could be denied insurance for surviving. Surviving sexual assault is already expensive. Now it could be even worse." This is by Carly Mee, staff attorney at Serve Justice, where she provides direct legal representation to survivors of sexual violence in civil, campus, and criminal systems. "When I learned that the most recent version of American Health Care Act allows insurers to classify rape as a pre-existing condition and thus put survivors at risk for increased costs and denial of coverage, my initial inclination was to pull out a calculator." Before refuting this, factually, there is something here that needs to be pointed out, and it is this. What is really at the bottom of all of this is an abject fear of having to pay for your own stuff in life. That's what this really, really comes down to. Not just in this specific case here, but it boils down to this idea that when it comes to health care, I should have to pay for anything. I shouldn't have to pay a dime for anything, no matter what happens to me. If it requires any kind of medical attention, somebody else should pay for it. And I'm just here to tell you that if that maintains, there will never be any reform of health care, and there will never be any return to 4% economic growth in this country, because as long as people end up paying every dime of their disposable income for health insurance premiums, well, you can say goodbye to rising tides lifting all boats. If there isn't some modification to this idea that when it comes to health care, you pay nothing, how silly is it when you look at how high the cost of premiums is and how high the deductibles are? But when it comes to out-of-pocket, people do not, these people on the left at any rate, do not think they should have to pay for a thing. And so now they're running around trying to classify every activity that they consider to be suffering or whatever as a pre-existing condition so that they can say that the Republicans want to deny them health coverage. Now, the claim substantively is wrong, but it pains me to even have to go there to refute this because it accepts their stupid fool premise. But I'm going to do it, just to make sure I dot all the I's and cross all the T's, and that is coming up. Don't go away. One of the headlines or narratives of this whole story that the Republican Health Care Act eliminates pre-existing condition coverage for rape victims and sexual assault victims. White men made rape a pre-existing condition. No, it's all over. It depends on where you go. You can have a very Daily Cause. Doesn't matter what blog you choose. This is white men made rape a pre-existing condition. Now wait just a second. Now wait just a second on this. First of all, I thought everybody wanted everything to be a pre-existing condition. Where did I miss something here? Everybody wants everything to be a pre-existing condition because that way you can't be denied insurance, right? So what are these people afraid of? Well, if rape is a pre-existing condition, these people are trying to tell everybody else the Republicans want to eliminate pre-existing condition coverage. And they're focusing on rape as the issue because that's a hot-button issue for young leftist millennial women. But it's all bogus. The whole thing is bogus. A woman named Elizabeth Brown in Reason took this on substantively and illustrated how none of this is true. She said the latest less-than-truthful meme about Republicans' American Health Care Act passed by the House on Thursday is that it makes rape a pre-existing condition for health insurance purposes. According to a host of women's publications and an army of outraged tweeters, sexual assault and domestic abuse survivors could soon be forced to disclose their attacks to insurance companies, which could then deny them health insurance coverage because of it. The theme here is the insurance companies are mean-spirited and evil, and if they can get out of covering you, they will. And if they can say you've got a pre-existing condition, then they don't have to cover you. And so what they want you to do is they want you to have to report that you've been raped or that you've been sexually assaulted so they can deny you coverage. This is what's going around out there. Except none of it's true. Not even a little bit of this is true. And I ought not even have to say that it's true, not true. It ought to be an automatic conclusion. Whoever's running around saying this is gone. They're literally out of their minds. The fact that it is not just being shared by shady social media activists and their unwitting dupes, but by ostensibly legitimate media outlets like New York Magazine and the Washington Post, is another sad indictment of press standards these days, says Elizabeth Nolan Brown. Nothing in the Republican health care bill specifically addresses sexual assault or domestic violence whatsoever. What it does say is that states can apply for waivers that will allow insurance companies under certain limited circumstances to charge higher premiums to people based on their personal medical histories. That is it. Zip, zero, nada. That is it. And the reason for this is to lower premiums. Premiums are out of control. And if you want to know how the Republicans can win big politically with this, it's very simple. If they end up passing something like what the House passed, if the Senate doesn't butcher this, and the odds of that are pretty big, the Senate's going to butcher it. I mean, listening to Susan Collins, it's not a good sign. But if, just to play if this bill actually went to Trump's desk in similar form, insurance premiums would fall dramatically. If that were to happen, why, my friends, that's the only thing people will notice about the health care bill is that it finally has been made cheaper and is more affordable, and that the Republicans did it. That is the upside about which I spoke in the first half hour of the program. So, okay, here's your question. So what if states are allowed to raise rates for rape survivors? Okay. Well, this same woman, Elizabeth Nolan Brown, wrote that in the 1980s, some companies considered domestic abuse a condition for denying care. But, are you ready for the numbers here? By 2009, all but 8 U.S. states had passed laws directly prohibiting the practice. And as of July 14th, all but 6 states had. Even if Obamacare is replaced by this Republican bill tomorrow, insurance companies in 44 states will be barred by law from considering domestic and sexual abuse a pre-existing condition. This narrative that is running around the mainstream media that has co-opted a bunch of don't know any better Twitterites is a 100% purposeful lie. In 44 states, there are already laws on the books which prevent exactly what is being promoted and threatened here in the Washington Post and in New York Magazine. And this is just one example, a microcosm of how much full-fledged BS and outright lies are circulating as mainstream news about everything. The French election, the Trump presidency, the Russian tampering with the election. There are so many lies and so much BS circulating as mainstream news that it establishes my new theory that it is the media running the show for progressivism and liberalism, and that the Democrat Party is simply that entity which implements it legislatively and votes on it in Congress, but that the actual intellectual energy and movement for all of this progressivism, all of these lies, all of this hysteria is, in fact, the mainstream media. We'll be back after this. All right, we have a full roster, a full board of calls, so those of you on hold, I want you to be patient. You're there because it has been determined that you are worthwhile occupying time on this program. That's a major achievement, a major accomplishment. I mean, folks, that's akin to being accepted to a major university, as being screened and acceptable as a caller on this program. It's a privilege, so if you're there, hang on. We'll get to you. Yeah, I know. I said it so quickly it went by. What I said was, and by the way, Snerdley has a caller up there who disagrees with me. You know how I'm looking forward to that? Folks, I don't know if it's like this with you, but nobody ever disagrees with me. No matter what I say, yep, that's right. Yep, I mean, some people try to point out some things I've missed, but no, I never have anybody disagree with me. You know how not fun that is? So I'm ecstatic. We have somebody up there who disagrees. It's about the French election, but at least it's somebody who disagrees with me. Greetings and welcome back. Great to have you here. Rush Limbaugh at 800-282-2882. What I said was, if you listen to the Democrats and the left's predictions of what sounds like a Republican-triggered genocide, you'd think that we're all fetuses in a Planned Parenthood waiting room. That's what I had some. What did you say about fetuses and Planned Parenthood? That's what I said. Well, it was part of everything that the Republicans do is going to kill people. If you listen to the left, there is a Republican genocide underway, as though we're all fetuses in a Planned Parenthood waiting room. I think it's a great analogy. But I admit the brilliance might have been obscured because I rolled through that so quickly as part of another point that I was making, which is this gross and grotesque hysteria that has greeted the House Republican health care bill. Now I want to go to the audio sound bites, and Mr. Broadcast Engineer, we're going to start at the top. It was back in March. It was on March 29th this year that I announced a new theory. And to wit, this is what I said. Who's really an arm of who? Is the media an arm of the Democrat Party, or is the Democrat Party an arm of the media? I've been pondering this, ladies and gentlemen. I actually think you could make the case that the Democrats are incidental to the media. The point being that everybody thinks the Democrats run the show. The Democrats are the power in Washington. They hold elective office. And the media operates in a supporting role to bolster them, to prop them up, to encourage them to go out and attack their opponents. And it suddenly, and I don't know what caused this to happen, it hit me, it's the other way around now. I mean, the Democrats are losing elections. Now, don't get mad at me. This is undeniable. Democrats are losing elections, but you would never know it. That fact simply isn't reflected in our modern news political coverage. If you didn't know any better, if you just landed from Mars, you would think that there has been a coup and that a couple of Republicans took over the country led by Donald Trump, and they're running it against the public will, and that the mass majority of people are still in favor of Democrats, still wish Obama was president or wish Hillary was, and that what we have here is an illegitimate governing minority. You would never know that the Democrats have been losing elections dramatically since 2010. And that, to me, says that is the media running the Democrats and not the Democrats running the media, because there is simply no reflection of that reality in any of the daily what is called news. And it actually isn't news. What it is the onward march of the leftist progressive agenda as led by the media. The Democrats take their talking points from the media. The Democrats take their talking points and their message from the media. We've always thought for the longest time that it was Democrats like Harry Reid or Pelosi giving phrases and words and ideas to the media, and then they ran with it. I think it's the other way around now. And I don't think there's any doubt about this. And it's proven again by one salient fact. Democrats are losing elections. They have less power, electoral power, in Washington than they've had since the 1920s. And yet, no such reality is ever seen. No such reality is ever acknowledged. In fact, it's just the opposite. So it's the media running the show. And so I thought we'd put together some sound bites as an illustration, as an example. And what we've done, Cookie found a couple things here that fit the theorem. We go back to Thursday afternoon. CNN special coverage of the passage in the House of the Obamacare repeal and replace bill. In the aftermath here, the CNN anchor Jake Tapper is speaking with former Obama White House senior advisor David Axelrod about the bill.
You used to make political TV ads for a living. Give me what you think, based on what just happened, is the prototypical Democratic attack ad against a Republican who just voted for this bill. How is this going to be cast in front of voters in, say, a swing district?
Certainly, this issue of pre-existing conditions is going to be front and center. There are millions of Americans who are getting money, who are getting coverage through the expansion of Medicaid. Many of the people taking up that coverage are people who are in the Trump base. And so that's going to be part of the advertising that goes into some of these districts.
So you see what's happening here. Right after the vote, and right after the Trump presser, right after that little victory party they had up there at the White House, CNN began the process of writing ads for the Democrats. Jake Tapper brings in Axelrod. So what's your ad going to be? I mean, you guys make political ads for a living. Give me what you think, based on what just happened, is the prototypical Democrat attack ad against a Republican who just voted for the bill. How's this going to be cast? So the idea and the premise of the Democrats coming out with TV attack ads gets started on CNN later the same afternoon on CNN's special coverage, and that's what it was. They stopped everything to do special coverage of the passage in the House of the beginning phase of removing Obama's legacy. Wolf Blitzer is speaking with senior political reporter Nia Malika Henderson about the Republican bill. And Wolf Blitzer says the Republicans are making progress in the president's agenda. President Trump deserves a lot of credit for this initial step.
He promised premiums are going to start to come down. I'm not sure when he means they're going to start to come down. And he also said that deductibles will be going down as well. I mean, today you could see the places where Democrats can make ads out of this event, sort of them laughing and joking and the celebration.
Right. So here we have a CNN, the discussion of ads that the Democrats need to start putting together in order to counter what the Republicans did in their first phase of repealing Obamacare. Later the same day, still CNN special coverage of the passage in the House of the Obamacare repeal and replace bill. A co-anchorette, Brooke Baldwin, speaking with CNN political director David Chalian about the bill, and they said this to each other.
Soundbite and play it over and over and over again. How the Democrats are salivating over how they want to cut these ads to swing through in the midterms.
It's just like we're watching the mirror image of where we were in the fall of 2009 when this vote was taken on the House floor and Nancy Pelosi, with a Democratic-controlled House, and the Democrats had the Senate and the Democrats had the presidency, and they got this through by the skin of their teeth, a 2-vote margin, and Republicans started immediately plotting their path back on this issue.
She says, cut the soundbite, play it over and over again, how the Democrats are salivating over how they want to cut these ads to swing through. The Democrats aren't salivating, CNN is. CNN salivating over the ads and telling the Democrat guess what they need to do and ask them if they agree with what CNN thinks they ought to do in terms of these ads. So after all of this, and there was more, these are just 3 salient bites, after CNN's advice, the Democrats had an ad up and running on Friday. It's entitled Disastrous McSally, focused on Representative Martha McSally, Republican Rhode Island, and her vote to repeal Obamacare. And here's the audio of the ad.
Congresswoman McSally just voted for a disastrous health care repeal bill opposed by the American Medical Association, AARP, and the American Cancer Society. McSally voted to raise your costs and cut coverage for millions, to let insurance companies deny affordable coverage for cancer treatment and maternity care, and charge 5 times more for people over 50. McSally voted yes, even though the bill makes coverage completely unaffordable to people with pre-existing conditions. Congresswoman McSally, how could you do this to us?
Yeah, Congresswoman McSally. So just one ad, the premise for which started on CNN, with David Axelrod being, so what are you guys going to do? You know, what we think you ought to do here is an ad that repeats this, and 3 more CNN info people pick it up and continue to make the case. Then the ad shows the next day. Now, earlier in the program, when I mentioned that various media outlets were characterizing the health care bill as genocide, Republicans want to kill people passed by a bunch of old white men. Where are you seeing that? Snurtley said. Well, let's go to the montage, shall we? Again, more evidence, ladies and gentlemen, of the media setting the narrative, establishing the phraseology. We have here in this montage Andrea Mitchell, NBC News in Washington. We have Hillary Rosen, who is a commentator at CNN. Christina Greer, Victor Blackwell. We have Chris Hayes at MSNBC. We have Elizabeth Pran at CNN. We have George Stephanopoulos, Donnie Deutsch, Anderson Cooper, Chris Jansen, Brooke Baldwin, Wanda Sykes, CNN. Listen to the montage from the drive-by media, not an elected Democrat to be found here.
Looked at the Rose Garden and the celebration. They were mostly all men, and white men at that. There was no diversity there.
Look at what the Senate did, creating a working group of all white men.
I think the visual of the all older white, predominantly white men is deliberate.
What appeared to be dozens of white men.
Here are dozens of white men that just made this vote.
There's a lot of men in that group, a lot of white men.
Not a single woman. Cecile Richards from Planned Parenthood tweeted, when women aren't at the table, we're on the menu.
What are we looking at? A bunch of fat, middle-aged, rich white guys.
You scan the crowd, it's pretty much a sea of white men.
He's surrounded by middle-aged white men.
This is not the picture of diversity, all these white guys in ties.
They're just trying to erase anything that President Obama did. That's racism. That's it.
That's it. Wanda Sykes, who once wished that I would die, is saying there's nothing here but racism. This is all media. There's not an elected Democrat in this montage. It's all media saying it's just a bunch of all white men. No diversity. It was George Stephanopoulos who quoted Cecile Richards. She's the daughter of Ma Richards, the former governor of Texas. She runs Planned Parenthood. She tweeted, when women aren't at the table, we're on the menu. What in the name of Sam? And it's from this that we get narratives such as the Republicans want to make rape a pre-existing condition so that rape survivors can be denied health insurance and medical coverage. But the point is here, this is, Snurdly said, who's saying that? Who's saying that white men did? There you have it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 different people just in this montage. From Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. All media, not a single elected Democrat in this montage. Let's go to Meet the Press. On Sunday, fill-in host Andrea Mitchell, NBC News in Washington, is speaking with the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Tom Price, about the gathering of House Republicans, along with the President and Vice President at Rose Garden, after the passage of the Obamacare replacement bill. Andrea Mitchell said, let's talk about women. When we look at that Rose Garden and the celebration of this on Thursday, they were mostly all men, and white men at that. There was no diversity there. Women's health issues arguably going to be disproportionately affected. Obamacare includes maternity, newborn care, preventative care, mammograms, cervical cancer screenings, birth control, all of this under the essential package no longer required under the House bill that was put together by a bunch of fat, old white guys.
Andrea, come on, look at that picture. Congresswoman Diane Black, the chair of the Budget Committee, I was standing next to her. Seema Verma, the administrator of CMS, I was standing right next to her.
Out of a group of dozens and dozens of people, you can cite two or three women?
These are prominent individuals who are leading in this area of health care. But the goal, as I mentioned, is to make certain that every single American, men, women, rich, poor, old, young, have the kind of coverage that they want for themselves and for their families, not that government forces them to buy. That's the change.
Right. Now, that's all true. But here again, I have just a tiny problem. And that is that Andrea Mitchell, NBC News, advances this premise that what the Republicans did is unjust and immoral and illegitimate because there was no diversity in the ceremony. There weren't any women to be found. There weren't any black women. There weren't any Asian women. There weren't any ISIS women. There weren't any women from Boko Haram. There weren't women from anywhere. And therefore, this is illegitimate. And the answer, do you mean to tell me that the substance of this bill is affected? You don't think human beings can come up with a health care bill for human beings? You telling me, Ms. Mitchell, that the only thing valid in your eyes is if half of this group would have been women, and even if it had been half women, they'd all been Republican women, and you'd be trashing them for being Republicans, not for being women. You wouldn't have given us any credit. I almost said the excrement slang word. Whoa. Okay, time to get started on the phones here, and we're going to go to Austin, Texas. This is Rick, and I'm glad you called, sir. Great to have you with us. How are you doing?
I am doing wonderful, Rush, and this is an incredible honor. In fact, this moment in time right now is on my bucket list, and I appreciate it so much.
Well, thank you, bro. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I've listened to you since '89 when I was in the Army, when my friends turned me on to you, and I've listened ever since. I'm even on an iPhone talking to you because of you. But what you mentioned about the French election, my wife knows the language, and she's been kind of following it a bit. And, you know, from the French perspective, I realize they have a lot of socialist tendencies, but they were basically choosing between a Donald Trump and a George Bush. I mean, there was no liberal even in the race anymore. And you know, from their perspective, that's kind of how they see it. And I see liberalism taking a hit, you know, there just like it's taking a hit here.
Well, I wish that were true. Everything that I have been able to learn about this, the kid over there that won the election, you know, he was in the government of Francois Hollande. He ran without a party, obviously, which was an optical thing. But the guy comes from socialist roots, as does Le Pen in her own way. The interesting thing about the French election is how many people didn't show up and vote, and the fact that none of the French two major parties were able to nominate a candidate. Both these people come from outsider parties. But Macron he doesn't represent a dramatic change. The European Union is still going to dominate and run France.
Sure.
And if this were kicking out... The issue in France, by the way, as best I was able to determine it myself, and I know your wife speaks the language, and it probably facilitated her being able to have a direct understanding of what was being said. I had to read English translations of some of what these people were talking about. And it seemed to me that this election can be seen in what happened in Paris versus and the other 15 somewhat large cities and the rest of the country. In Paris, I think 90% of the vote went to this guy. Now, the 90% of the vote that went is the establishment, the elites, the globalists, the people that in this country, the equivalent of the K Street lobbyist bankers, Wall Street, arts and croissant crowd, their version of Hollywood, the fashion industry, all of the beautiful people. 90% voted for this guy. It was not quite that bad in the other cities, but it was close. And in everywhere else, it was much closer. And it was actually a referendum on globalism versus nationalism. And the people voted for globalism. There were enough people in the cities to overwhelm the vote outside the cities. And the people in the cities are doing, relative to other people, quite well. Unemployment's not as bad. The economy's not as bad. If you get outside the cities, and not just in suburban areas, but rural areas, those are the equivalents of the Rust Belt and places in America which have lost manufacturing. But the real thing that didn't happen was Paris itself has become segregated and violent because of militant Islamic terrorism. And the vote does not reflect any anger or disagreement or any willingness to do anything about it. And that's the stunning thing. They voted to accept the status quo rather than cause problems. Well, darn it, I was sure today was going to be beta software upgrade day, and it's not. Very, very strange. Hey, welcome back. Great to have you. This is Rush Limbaugh, making more sense than anything anybody else is out there is saying. Documented to be almost always right 99.8% of the time. Like, if you look at geographically speaking in France, Marine Le Pen did her best in two areas. In the north of France, which is France's industrial base, which is now its Rust Belt. Big decline there because of globalism. And she did well in the south, around Marseille and Nice. Marseille, big organized crime area in France. And Nice, of course, the Côte d'Azur, the French Riviera. Those areas have been completely overrun by Islamic immigrants. Now, Macron, the kid, on the other hand, he did his best in the cities, as I said, particularly in Paris, with 90% of the vote. They are full of immigrants, and they're areas that the communists and the socialists have always carried. And remember, I was out in Sedona, Arizona over the weekend, and I had a couple of drivers in my group of people that were from Venice, from Italy. They were nice guys. They were, and they've only been here a year, and they're doing their best to establish lives here, and they've got their business of auto transportation. And I asked them, why are you here? And they said, there's nothing left for us in Italy. It's been taken over by the communists and the immigrants. And people like us, we've been shunned. There's nothing for us there. So they fled, and they are in Sedona, Arizona. And I understood completely what they were talking about. In fact, we began a conversation about it. These guys were very informed and explicit. And the fact they love Italy. I mean, it's their home. They love it. They're pained that they had to leave. Didn't want to leave. But their government's not looking out for them. And it's the same thing as here. I mean, these are native Italians, and in their minds, they were portrayed as the problem. Or they were taken for granted and overlooked. It was just assumed that whatever the Italian government did, these people would suck it up. It's the same situation in Greece. There's one country in the European Union. And by the way, this is an interesting little tidbit. I can't remember if I mentioned this on Thursday or not. Macron is angry at Poland. Poland has very strict immigration policies and is not changing them. And this guy, part of his campaign was to make Poland pull more of its weight in the European Union or in the European region. There was an accompanying chart to this story that had all the countries of the European Union, and there were colored dots in various parts of each country to denote terrorist attacks that had happened. And the dots were color-coded. A red dot meant multiple terror attacks had occurred in that area. Most of the dots were yellow, and they were all over the place. There was only one country where there were no dots, meaning only one country where there were no reported terrorist attacks, and that was Poland. And so when I heard that Macron was dumping on Poland, claiming it wasn't carrying its fair share, it obviously meant that Poland wasn't opening its borders to these immigrants, as evidenced by the fact that there weren't any terror attacks there. Now, rather than look at Poland as maybe a guiding and learning exercise, what liberals do is they look at all the countries where there is terrorism and acknowledge why, and get mad at Poland because they don't have any. It's not fair that we're having terror attacks in France and you in Poland aren't having it. It's not fair they're having terror attacks in the UK and you people in Poland aren't. And so the way we equalize this and the way we bring justice to this is to make sure that Poland experiences some terrorism too. That's not what they say. What they say is Poland must start carrying its weight on refugees and immigrants. That Poland says, we don't want any. We're not our culture disrupted or what have you. We don't want our economic system overburdened. And so they've been immune from the accompanying crime and terror attacks. And instead of looking at that, say, wow, maybe we ought to start emulating Poland. Instead, they look at Poland and get mad that Poland is not carrying its weight here. It's 180 degrees out of phase. Who's next? Fred in Cleveland. I'm glad you waited, Fred. It's great to have you on the EIB network. Hello.
Hi, Rush. Mega dittos.
Thank you, sir.
I'll get right to my point. I think that the dominoes for Trump are slowly falling in slow motion. The American people, because of the media, we're not being told every little positive thing that's happening. We go from regulation reform to immigration, health care, tax reform. I think it's time to start putting things in the rearview mirror. Forget about tax reform or health care right now. Let Mitch McConnell deal with it. I think we need to look forward. Trump needs a little more time. I mean, if this was, think about you being thrown into the leadership role of Exxon, and Rex Tillerson says, yeah, I'll be a nice guy, I'll coach you through it, and instead he does things behind your back and turns the screws. It would take you 5 years to to be the good leader of Exxon. So Trump, we give him another 3 months, 4 months, a year from today, I'm telling you everything's going to be reversed. The Trump train will be rolling through Washington and throwing the disagreeers off the train as it rolls forward.
Wait a minute, I'm confused here. Who are you upset with?
I am not upset with anyone, but I fear that Maharishi is being roped in by the negativity in the media.
That's what I mean. How am I being roped in by the negativity? What am I saying that's
I think that we're getting lost in the details, in the weeds. This whole healthcare thing, I don't care how many insiders we know, we'll never know the details of what's really going on with, the details of healthcare. The Dems are going to lie about it.
Right.
The Republicans are too afraid to speak up.
I get it. You think that I'm off the reservation by spending time talking about the leftists complaining that after they've been raped, they're going to be classified with pre-existing conditions. And you think that clouds the issue, that you think Trump is having some success here. It's slow, but the dominoes are starting to fall on repealing Obamacare and basically getting rid of the Democrat agenda at large. You think it's happening. It's happening slowly. The media is not reporting it. You wish there were more positive reporting on this, and you think I am falling prey to the negativism.
Somewhat, but not on a grand scale. I think we just need to control the narrative and push forward. You know what I mean? The next thing that we should be talking about is tax reform. And when that happens at the end of the week or in about 2 weeks, then we put that in the rearview mirror and start after whatever's next after that.
Fred, I get all this, but the point is nothing's happened yet. Now, I'm not being negative here. We've had the first stage of repealing Obamacare, but we haven't repealed Obamacare. Obamacare is still a law of the land. What the Republicans passed in the House now has to go to the Senate. And it has to pretty much, if they make very many changes in this, is whatever they come up with, if it differs in any way, then the House and Senate have to get together and come up with an agreement based on the differences in the two. That's called a conference committee. Then out of that comes one bill. Both houses agreed to. That bill goes back to the House and the Senate, where they each have to vote again to pass it, and then it has to go to Trump. So there hasn't been any change yet. I'm not being negative here. I think it's a great first step, and I can make the case that this, if it's intact and goes all the way through, that it's going to have a major achievement. It will lower premiums. And in a political sense, that could be wind at the Republicans' back that the Democrats can't stop. But it hasn't happened yet. Tax reform hasn't happened. Yes, it has been presented. The president's plan has been presented. But nothing's happened yet. That's not being negative. I'm not acting like nothing's happened. I'm not acting like we haven't had anything there is progress. And you're right, it's slow. Now that I wonder if I ought to mention something here. Fred, let me ask you a question before you go. Are you still there, Fred?
Yes, sir.
Let me ask you a quick question. When you watched the celebration last Thursday in the Rose Garden outside the White House, when the Republicans from Capitol Hill bust up there, and they had this big party and celebration with Trump and the podium and various members of the House Republican caucus. What did you think of that? Did you like that? Did you like the optics? Did you think it was a good thing?
Rush, what I saw on the faces of those people standing behind Trump was enthusiasm and reassurance. You know what I mean? That Trump does things as president that no other president has done. Obama never met the people in the Senate or Congress. You know what I mean? Trump is willing to do what other men that were presidents would not do. He's a man of the people. Those people behind him, if there were no cameras around, they would have been jumping up and down with their hands in the air, high-fiving and cheering. They're ready to go. They're ready to get work done.
All right. Fred, I get it. I understand totally.
Okay.
All right. I'm glad you called. Help me out here, okay?
Well, thank you, Rush. I'm concerned. I don't want to see you get lost in the weeds.
Fred, don't worry about me, my man. Do not worry about... I don't like weeds. My father made me mow weeds and cut weeds when I've hated weeds ever since I was 12 years old. I'll never go in the weeds. I'm never going to take you in the weeds. I don't go in the weeds. I don't get in the weeds of this stuff. That's not what I'm doing. You dare call me the Prince of Optimism, a pessimist? But I understand why. I understand. Tell him what? No, I'm not going to tell him. Because to him that celebration was all Trump. That didn't all Trump. Trump is the big difference here. And he's right in that sense, but he's a Trump voter. You've got to understand, and these people are not being talked out of supporting Trump. That's why Fred's opinion on this is so relevant. The media is doing everything they can to distance guys like Fred from Trump, and it isn't working. And that's got to be infuriating. Fred, thanks. I understand it. Don't worry about me, though, Fred. Don't worry. Here's John in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm glad you called, sir. How you doing?
Real good, Rush. Thank you very much for taking my call.
Yes, sir.
I am very honored to speak with you. The reason for my call was to congratulate you on the insightful and thoughtful dialogue that you presented last week on two issues. The predominant one was, why vote Republican? I feel that sincerely, along with the discussion with Pence, was the reason that the Republicans finally got off their butt in the House of Representatives to get something going.
No kidding. That's awfully nice. You think that my asking, if it was after the budget deal debacle, and I said, if this is voting Republican, why do we need to ever vote Republican? Because the Democrats won most of that budget deal. You think raising that point might have influenced the vote on the Obamacare repeal and replace?
Without question. I think that showed and brought to light the weakness of the Republican Party in that I'm not sure who was singing at the passage. There was a goodbye thing. If Dems thought that the Republicans were going to be voted out because they pushed that through.
Well, you may have a point. It's not for me to say, but I very much thank you for making the point. I appreciate it. I'll be right back with more. I was not being unappreciative of what the caller just said. I just said that's not for me to say. I appreciated him saying it. going to sit here and say that. At least, not much. Anyway, we'll be back here, folks. Just 1 hour left. Don't go anywhere. Hi, folks. Welcome back. Great to have you here. It is the all-knowing, all-caring, all-sensing, all-feeling, all-concerned Maharishi here behind the golden EIB microphone. Telephone number 800-282-2882. If you want to be on the program, the email address lrushbo@eibnet.com. With a shout out here to Fred in Cleveland. Fred's our recent caller who thought, what was he? He thought that I was drinking the Kool-Aid and going negative here. Pessimistic. But about what? What have I said today that made him think? Seriously, what have I'm just asking. The what? Okay, so Fred was worried that I'm pessimistic or falling prey to the media negativism about Trump. Okay, that's a good way to put it. Fred thought I wasn't positive enough by focusing on all these media complaints. And that's what they are, but they're not Democrat complaints, they're media complaints. It was the Washington Post where the story was that the Republican health care bill was going to deny rape victims insurance because they're going to call rape and the cause of rape. By the way, this is very important, too. You want to get in the weeds. Imagine claiming that the Republican health care bill is going to deny women who have been raped pre-existing insurance based on its being called a pre-existing condition, not just rape, but the cause of it. Whatever that is, the complaint here is the rape and the circumstances leading to it, the Republicans want to classify as a pre-existing condition so that rape victims will not be able to be insured. And that is against the law already in 44 states. The Republican health care bill doesn't say a word about rape or sexual assault or pre-existing conditions regarding either instance. It's not in the bill. What it does say is that it turns back to the states some discretion in the rules that insurance companies will have and can mandate on all that. The whole objective is to bring down the cost of premiums because Obama has sought to basically insure everything, that nothing could be denied, and therefore nobody would have to spend a dime of their own money, theoretically, other than the premium, which nobody can afford, or very few. Anyway, my point here was that it was not a Democrat coming up with this. It was the media, New York Magazine, then the Washington Post, then the Huffington Puffington Post came along and started making hay about this, even though in 44 states it is already expressly illegal to say that rape or sexual abuse qualifies as a pre-existing condition, meaning nobody in those circumstances would have to or could get insurance. They could be denied. And the upshot of it is that the Republicans wanted to deny rape victims health insurance. That's what the claim is. And it's nowhere in the bill. It's nowhere. It's not even alleged. It's not even assumed. It's not even imagined. It's not even pretend there. It's zilch, zero, nada. And they're running around with this meme. So I'm talking about this, and Fred says, you're getting way in the weeds here. You're not being optimistic enough. That's too pessimistic. You need to focus on the positive. Folks, what we do here is anti-leftist critique and studies. Told you why, I don't know how many times. These people have got to be defeated. It's getting... Bill Maher, everybody thinks that what Colbert did beyond the... How about Bill Maher on Friday? Did you hear about this? Literally made a joke that it was up to Ivanka Trump to give her dad oral sex to keep him from going extreme. That's her role, that she has to go in. If she has to give him oral sex in order to keep him from going off the reservation. And this stuff is it's not even funny. It's, I don't know how you want to characterize it, but it's unbalanced. There's something really, really off about these people on the left, and the question is, who's really driving this? Are these comedians saying these things because that's what their audiences want to hear, or are the comedians leading with this, attempting to influence their audiences? Either way, no matter which side of the equation you come down on, we are dealing with sincere sickness, some legitimate sickness that gets cover as late-night comedy, or it's just a joke. Learn to deal with it. But it is stuff, you turn this around and say one of these things about Obama's daughter and see what happens to you. Or try something like this on Chelsea Clinton and see what happens to you. I mean, you can forget ever being accepted as a civilized member of your city, your town, your community. You'd be fired from your job. Here, it gets analyzed under the guise of critical acclaim, and it's judged to maybe have gone a little bit too far. A little bit too far. But then people say, but we understand what Maher's trying to say here. Trump's really unpredictable, and his moderating influence is his daughter, who he has said he thinks is really beautiful. So they take that and they run to the most obscene conclusions they can come up with. I think they're running out of material because really this stuff doesn't take any talent to come up with. All it takes is coarseness. And it's, I don't know, in citing this stuff, though, I'm not trying to be pessimistic or negative about Trump or any of this, but there has to be at some point a resolution to all this. There has to be a price paid for this kind of stuff. There's always a price for, 1/10 of this. If somebody on the right happens to misspeak on a joke or whatever, there's always a severe and serious price to pay. There's zero price on the left for any of this. And I think what's really happening, and you'll never see it reported because, of course, the media is running the entire left wing of this country. But I think they are disgusting more and more people all over this country. I think they are just turning people off, and I don't think they yet have any idea of the damage they are doing to the Democrat Party, which is where people show their disgust with this. HBO doesn't get rated, so there's no way you can boycott HBO. There's no way you can not watch and have it hurt HBO. They make their money on how many people subscribe. And even if you don't watch it, you're still paying the subscription fee if it's on your cable system. All you can do is cancel it. It won't matter to them. And over at CBS with Colbert, Les Moonves, who runs, I don't care about ratings. I just want buzz. I haven't cared about ratings and late night. Doesn't matter to me. Of course, when they're getting close to Fallon, they tout it and highlight it. But publicly, they say ratings don't matter. So the only place that this stuff shows up is when it comes time to vote for Democrats. It's Democrats that are going to be held accountable for all of this rot gut sleaze, as it should be. But Rush, the Democrats aren't making it. Yeah, I know, but the people that are Democrats. They extol the virtues of the Democrats. It's well known they hate Republicans. And the only way people can express their shock and disgust with this is to vote against the people who are associated with this. And that happens to be the Democrat Party. And the Democrats have been losing elections, as we've noted here, since 2010, even before that, outside of Obama. Try this. From our old buddies at Campus Reform, Professor, House GOP should be lined up and shot. An Art Institute of Washington professor recently declared that House Republicans should be lined up and shot for their passage of an Obamacare replacement bill. The professor is John Griffin. He posted this to his Facebook page. They should all be lined up and shot, according to a screenshot of the post obtained by Campus Reform, even clarifying he wasn't being hyperbolic. He was saying, that's not hyperbole. Blood is on their hands. They are literally saying that the Republican vote on Obamacare repeal or replace is genocide, that the Republicans are killing people. Bette Midler, I gave you her quote earlier, that this is the Republican version of the way Bashar Assad gasses his own people. The Huffing and Puffington Post has promoted the idea of mailing the ashes of dead people to Republicans to protest the health care vote. The methods by which liberals are protesting against the president and his policies are becoming bizarre and obscene by the minute. And now it's getting disturbing. We had all this stuff going on out in Berkeley with riots anytime a syllable of conservatism is uttered. As the Huffington Post writes dramatically of college student Zoe Salisbury, she said she watched in horror Thursday as House Republicans passed an Obamacare repeal bill called the American Health Care Act, either unaware their legislation would kill people or simply unsympathetic enough to care that their legislation would kill people. So, Zoe Salisbury set out to make the GOP politicians face the consequences of their vote. She launched a website called MailMeToTheGOP.com. It is a website that pledges to send the ashes of your cremated body to a member of Congress should you die because of the Republican health care plan. The professor says members of the House should be lined up and shot. That is not hyperbole. They've got blood on their hand. Where do you go from here? I mean, once you say that Republicans are going to kill people, which they've been saying since 1995, where do you go from there? How much worse can it get? The Republicans are already killing and destroying the planet. The Republicans are poisoning the air and poisoning the water. The Republicans are starving your kids. And now the Republicans are killing you. And not just the Republicans, corporations like Exxon and all these big pharma, they are killing their customers. Where does this go from here? How do they add to this? Zoe Salisbury, student, said shipping cremated remains through the mail by any other service other than the U.S. Postal Service is illegal, but the Postal Service has a guide on how to do so. She is a junior at American University, and she told the Huffington Puffington Post, yes, this is real. Many of my friends will die if the American Health Care Act becomes the law. People will literally die, and they don't see that that's going to happen. It's really morbid. It's not fun to talk about, but that's the reality of passing a health care bill like this. Now, I mean, liberals have been accusing the Republicans of killing people since 1995. However, there's no evidence for it. Actually, it's further than 1995. I remember, and you do too, remember the 70s and 80s, where the Democrats were saying Republicans wanted to kick old people out of their houses. Republicans wanted to take Social Security away from old people. Let me repeat a funny story. I made a speech once at GOPAC in Washington, and at the time there was a major budget bill being discussed, as there seems to always be. And the Democrats were trying to say that the Republican budget was going to starve the elderly, and it was going to force the elderly to make a choice between life-saving medicine or food. But either choice they made, they would die. If they chose food, they would die from illness because they couldn't afford the medicine. If they bought the medicine, they would die from starvation because they couldn't afford the food. This is a major Democrat theme. So I opened my speech at GOPAC, which is Newt Gingrich's organization at the time, and I acknowledged the budget fight, thanked the people for being there, and mentioned that I was aware of what's going on, but that I had found the solution. I had purchased my mother a new can opener for the dog food that she would buy. My mother would be able to do both. My mother was going to buy dog food, have a new can opener to open it, and still get her medicine. And this was the way I was compassionately going to solve. Pat Schroeder, the congresswoman from Colorado, went to the floor of the House and actually didn't get the joke, didn't realize I'm making fun of them, and actually reported in a speech on the House floor that I thought the solution to this was buying new can openers for the elderly so that they could more easily open the dog food they would eat after the Republican budget. She called me the big kahuna of the right, and she said, well, there it is. This is who they are. Not the slightest idea that I was making big, fun, totally humiliating her and this entire Democrat Party meme. So after she makes the speech, somebody actually tugged her, pulled her aside. It was a joke. And not another word was said about it. But if somebody hadn't pulled her aside and told her the truth, they would have made campaign ads out of it, I'm sure. Limbaugh, solution to budget crisis, new can opener for mom so she can eat dog food. They believed I was serious. These people are nothing but sick. And this isn't new. And they are now paying the price for it at the ballot box. They just don't know. And this stuff is only ratcheting up now. So now here's this serious proposal. Line them up and shoot them. Or the next time somebody in your family dies, cremate them and send the ashes to somebody in Congress claiming the death is due to the Republican Health Care Act. Okay, Here's what Bill Maher said. We've bleeped it. We have edited it, but you will get the idea. This from his show Friday night, Real Time with Bill Maher.
A lot of us thought, oh, Ivanka's going to be our saving grace. You know, when he's about to nuke Finland or something, she's going to walk into the bedroom and, you know, Daddy. Don't do it, Daddy.
Don't do it, Daddy. Don't nuke Finland. No, he was making hand gestures there as to what she would be doing to her father. Well, I know that it's Ivanka's mind is not there. This is not Trump's mind. This is Bill Maher's mind. And they try to pass this off as this is the kind of people Ivanka Trump and Donald Trump are. It's not. It's the kind of guy Bill Maher is. This is the stuff in Bill Maher's mind, not in Ivanka's mind. This is the sick thing about this. They want you to believe that Trump and his family are demented or whatever. The dementedness is all in the eyes of the people making these jokes and the beholders of this stuff. It's just... But they're out of material. They're frustrated beyond belief. Nothing they've done has separated Trump supporters from Trump. They can't believe it. They're mad they don't have any influence here. By the way, here is more evidence of my newly evolved theorem that it is the media running everything and the Democrats are just an arm of it. Donald Trump tweeted today the following: ask Sally Yates under oath if she knows how classified information got into the newspapers soon after she explained it to the White House counsel. This is about Flynn and Sally Yates, a Clinton and Obama holdover at the Department of Justice, and she's claiming she told everybody in the White House Flynn was a bad guy, didn't listen to her. She's testifying today. So Trump sends out the tweet, ask Sally Yates under oath today if she knows how classified. In other words, ask Sally Yates, yeah, she's leaking stuff. John King and Dana Bash on CNN ripped Trump today for witness intimidation of Sally Yates. Before I covered politics all the time, I used to cover the courts a lot, John King said. A lawyer would call that witness intimidation. Dana Bash said, yeah, completely. A Democrat didn't, well, these Democrats, but an elected Democrat didn't say. This is the media carrying the water, running the show for the Democrats. You know, my little joke about Democrats running around claiming that senior citizens back in the 90s had to make a decision where they're going to buy medicine or food because they couldn't afford to do both because Republicans cutting the budget. That was all BS. What's really true is how many people have had to make decisions on rent and mortgage payments or health insurance because of Obamacare? How many people have had this gigantic, oppressive Obamacare premium cost or any other insurance cost versus other things in life that are necessities? Now that Obamacare has become a mandated law, you have to have it. Realize how many people have had to give up other things in their life in order to comply with the law on this. If the Democrats run around and make all this stuff up about things Republicans are doing to people while they actually force these kind of choices on people. And then want great credit for having compassion and concern for the little guy who they're wiping out. Here's Stephen in College Park, Maryland. Great to have you on the EIB network. How you doing?
Well, not good. After the disaster from yesterday in France. I'm a French national, but I want to thank you for taking my call and all the great work you do in restoring sanity in the media.
Thank you, sir.
I wish you could be in France, too. They badly need you. And I'm going to apologize if you already know this, but yeah, I want to shed the light on how disinformed the French have been. So basically, anyone can look up the Guardian newspaper, November or December 2005, an article titled, and you will find it very easily. It says, French TV bosses admit censoring riots. If you look that up, you will see straight from the horse's mouth how they were bragging to a leftist rag in England in English, how they were basically lying to their public. The French have been fed a steady diet of disinformation for obviously well over a decade, and obviously it didn't stop then.
Disinformation about what specifically, Stephen?
Just about everything. Typically immigration, the level of immigration, even their government is in collusion with their media in ensuring that the public does not realize how much immigration has been taking place. There was an article in the New York in the Wall Street Journal when Sarkozy was elected back in 2007 called "Can Sarkozy Save France?" in which the author explained that since the family reunification law of 1976, over 200,000 people have been legally entering France over the past, obviously in this case, over the past now 40 years. These numbers have not gone down. Most of them, of course, come from Muslim countries.
Right.
And of course, their population base has effectively doubled. Just for your information, I'm a mathematician and statistician by training, data scientist, data analyst, and so on. So I've done my research. And
right, but the problem with this is that they're segregating themselves in their own neighborhoods. They're not becoming part of France per se, French culture, whatever that is. It's a balkanized society.
But that's what they do everywhere, whether it's in Sweden, in Great Britain, in Germany, and so on. The list goes on everywhere. I mean, as they grow their population base, if you understand that, anyway, the whole discussion, that's a whole discussion in itself. But if you just look up the article I mentioned, and also as a consequence of that, the Prime Minister in December 2013 stated in a publication kind of like Newsweek called Le Point, P-O-I-N-T, December 2013, you will see the article right there on the front page, which you go through the internet for that, but where he actually was quote-unquote shocked. It's in French, of course, but Valls, shocked by over 40,000 automobiles burnt in France every year. The French have no idea how much vandalism, destruction, crime, and now, of course, terrorism to top it off has
Wait a minute. You're telling me that the French are not aware that none of this is being reported?
They don't know. The media, the article I quoted, straight from the horse's mouth in the Guardian newspaper,
Well, for crying out, we know about it. I mean, we know when Charlie Hebdo gets vandalized and murdered. All these terror attacks in Paris. We see the video of it here in the States. You're saying they don't? They censor that?
Hold on a second. That's the tip of the iceberg that they could not hide. But when you talk about all the 40,000 automobiles that are burnt every year, and as I say, that's quoted finally by the Prime Minister.
You sure that's not the climate change crowd doing that?
What do you mean? I have been tracking the numbers.
Well, I mean, they hate automobiles.
Well, I mean, it doesn't matter. It's a type of vandalism. They also came up with a word called les tournants for a type of gang rapes that they've been doing in France.
Okay.
I mean, the list of crime
vandalism. Here's the point. I get it. The point is, and he's got a couple newspaper stories to back him up, that the French media is bragging to the British media how they're censoring the news of all of the vandalism, and the example is the 40,000 automobiles that are literally burned every year that the French people are not aware of because it isn't being reported. Now, that may sound really, really hard to believe. If you're an American and you are at all media savvy, if you're a consumer of news, you may think, how can they keep something like that? I mean, France is not nearly as big as the United States. How can they keep something like that? I mean, 40,000 cars burning and all this vandalism. I would only direct your attention to how much, let me put it this way. The people in this country who consume only mainstream media, how many of them do you think know what the murder rate is in Chicago? I bet you would be stunned to find out how few people in this country who really, nobody that reads the New York Times knows what's going on in Chicago. Guarantee you. Now, people in Chicago might, local media, they're covering it, but if you read the LA Times, if you watch ABC, CBS, you may know now, 4th of July weekend, there was some gunfire. You don't know the aggregate totals, the cumulative totals. You do not know. It's not reported in the drive-by because it's Democrats that run the town, Democrats that run the state. That's not good news. Just like how many people outside Detroit or Flint actually know what is going on there and for how long in all these Democrat runs. So it's entirely possible what he says is true. And by the same token, This is news that isn't covered. Imagine the BS that is reported that is also not true. It is, I think it's entirely possible that to a certain degree what Stephen here is saying could well be true, even though it can't possibly be. 40,000 cars in Paris and France burn every year and people don't know it. If it's not reported and you don't see it, and if it's not reported and there's no word of mouth and you don't hear about it and you don't see it, and if the details are not accompanying, whose cars, why, where, none of that is being reported, and we have evidence in this country of similar types of coverage, negative things that are attributable to Democrats, you have to look long and hard. You only see them in places that are not so-called mainstream media. So, okay, so when I looked up that article that Stephen was talking about, and it is the UK Telegraph, January, it was, November 10th, 2005. Here's the Guardian article that he's citing. French broadcasters have faced criticism for their lack of coverage of the country's worst civil unrest in decades. Public television station France 3 has stopped broadcasting the numbers of torched cars, while other TV stations are considering following suit. That is from the article the caller was citing. From the UK Telegraph, January, almost 1,000 cars torched around France on New Year's Eve, but government insists it went particularly well. From the article, according to the French Interior Ministry, the total of 945, which included cars that were either totally destroyed or more lightly affected, amounted to a 17% increase compared to last year. Despite this, New Year's Eve went off without any major incident. 945 cars torched, and it was fine and dandy. Nothing to see here. And the caller's right, French TV bragging to left-wing media in the UK how they're censoring the stories. So the news. They're not reporting it. French TV boss admits censoring riot coverage. UK Guardian. We'll find all these links. Well, I already did. And we'll put them up at rushlimbaugh.com so you can read them yourself and find out what the caller Stephen was talking about. Here's John, Worcester, Massachusetts. Great to have you, sir. How are you doing?
Hi, Rush. First-time caller here?
It's great to have you here.
Yeah. I had a couple of quick things. I've been listening to a lot of this going on, and I was wondering what your thoughts were that if we will ever see Hillary and the Obama staff ever held responsible for all the laws they've recently broken, because I know you or I would be held responsible for any laws we break.
Well, when it comes to prosecutions of Obama or Hillary staff, I don't really know. But if I had to guess, I wouldn't count on something like that happening for a host of reasons, unless something's discovered so egregious that they can't not do it. But I don't know that is something that's on the immediate horizon. I know they told me to lock her up and this kind of stuff, but I just don't see that in the immediate future. Great to be back, folks. Miss one day feels like I miss a week, so I'm glad to be back. And we'll be back tomorrow in 21 hours. Whatever happens between now and then, Sally Yates business. Only 3 Republicans showed up for this hearing, 9 Democrats. Nobody cares.